Hey, Amy from AWeSternLife.com, and today I want to show you how to make my favorite minestrone soup recipe. So I actually haven't made this in a long time, and I'm not really sure why. I think I've just been busy kind of doing other soup recipes, and so I have someone coming tonight to watch the kids while we go to our small group for our church, and so I thought this would be the perfect time to make minestrone soup. I could get it done ahead of time, clean my house, before our friend comes over to watch our kids, and we can share a meal with her. So it's a great recipe, especially if you want to make it for a big crowd. It's also great for leftovers, and it has lots of healthy ingredients. So what you need for this recipe is 3 slices of bacon, and this gives it a really good flavor. And also, who doesn't love bacon? And little chunks of bacon in their soup, it's really delicious. And a lot of recipes call for prosciutto, which is very expensive, and it's also can be hard to find. So bacon is a great substitute. But you're also going to need 1 large zucchini, 2 carrots, 2 stalks of celery, some kale or spinach. You could even use frozen of either of those. You need a 28-ounce can of tomatoes in their juice, just diced canned tomatoes. You're going to need cannellini beans or a different type of white beans. You can also use kidney beans. I'm just not really a fan of them, so I tend to opt out of them. And I like the smaller white beans, so that's why I go with the cannellini or green northern. You're also going to need an onion and then some potatoes. So I usually like to use like 3 large potatoes. If you have smaller potatoes, you're going to use a few more. And also I like to use the ones that have really thin skin. That way I don't have to peel them. So I'd rather just avoid this step altogether. So for this recipe, I'm using russet potatoes. You could also use red potatoes or gold potatoes. Those all have really thin skin, and they would work really well for this soup. Okay, so let's get started making the soup. This is actually a really old blog post, and so I just am finally sharing it on YouTube. But in the recipe, it calls for thyme, oregano, basil, and rosemary. Now, if you don't have those, that's okay. You can swap it out for Italian seasoning. And that's what I'm going to do today because I don't have all of those in separate things. So let's get started. So I'm going to start by just frying up the bacon. And this is just 3 slices of bacon. And these are like the longest bacon I've ever seen. Now, I'm using my Dutch oven. I love my Dutch oven. It's really great for making bread, soups, stews, so many things. Oh, I actually took out 4 pieces of bacon. Darn it. I'm going to have to add all 4. This recipe is really easy to kind of change based on what you like. If you don't like a lot of bacon, you can use less. Now you could totally skip it, and instead of using the bacon, you could use oil or to put down instead. While that's frying up, I'm actually going to start chopping my vegetables. And I like to start with the onions first, and then that way those can kind of simmer and saute in the pot after I take out the bacon. Because we're just trying to get the bacon cooked about 75%, and then it's going to finish cooking in the soup. We do a community-supported agriculture, and so we get a box of vegetables every week, and the onion I got is humongous, so I'm actually only going to use about half of this. Another tip is I actually never peel my carrots, very rarely, unless they're like really dirty, but I never peel my carrots because there's a lot of nutrients on the skin, and so you can just chop these up and add them to the soup. Now the bacon is about 3/4 of the way done, and it's going to finish cooking in the soup. So now we have all the yummy bacon fat on the bottom, and so we can add our onions and allow them to saute. I'm going to add these onions in, and I'm going to let these go just a few minutes before I start adding in the celery and the carrots. And I'm going to finish chopping up my potato and the rest of my ingredients. Now when it comes to the zucchini, I like to leave them a little bit thicker and a little bit bigger pieces in the soup because they can get really mushy really fast. And so if they're left a little bigger, they don't get as mushy, and I like to add these in. This and the kale last, so that way it doesn't just become a big bowl of mushy zucchini. Speaking of zucchini, what are you doing, zucchini? Have you met Zucchini, my dog? See it. Just in case if you wonder how much I love fruits and vegetables, my dog's names are Zucchini and Olive, so I'm going to add in the carrots and the celery. And then also we're gonna throw in these potatoes. So like I said before, you can use kale or spinach or even frozen kale or spinach in this recipe. I'm gonna use kale today because this is what came in our community supported agriculture, and it's starting to look a little sad. And so it really needs to be used. And so you need about 2 cups. Now, if you just love kale, you could add a little bit more, or if you don't like it, you can use a little less, or even cut it into smaller pieces. That can really help make it more tolerable. But so we're gonna use about 2 cups, which in this case, I'm gonna probably use about maybe half the bunch. And you're gonna wanna de-stem if you are using kale, you wanna de-stem it. And so just take the leaves off the stem and toss the stem to the chickens or in your compost bin. I forgot to mention that in my Instant Pot, I have a whole chicken. I have a whole chicken and broth going. Now, if you want the recipe, this is what I make every single week. I make a whole chicken and broth so I can make soup throughout the rest of the week, and then we can use the chicken throughout the rest of the week. I actually have a YouTube video on how to do that you can check out, and I'll put a link below. Because as soon as we have all this going, after we add the potatoes, we can add in the tomatoes, and we can also add in the chicken broth. Now you can also use vegetable broth, whatever you kind of have on hand. I really love using homemade chicken broth just because it's full of collagen and a lot of healthy nutrients, and so we love making homemade bone broth, and so that's what we use. I'm just going to add in these diced tomatoes and their juice, and you're going to need about 6 to 8 cups of chicken broth. If you like a more stewy type of soup, you can use 6. I love brothy soups, and so I will use 8. After I added all of the tomatoes and the juices, this is going to be my time that I add my chicken broth, and so you can use store-bought chicken broth. I have homemade, and I'm just going to pour it in from my Instant Pot into my big Dutch oven. So now I'm going to cook this for approximately 15-20 minutes until the potatoes are nice and soft. I'm also going to chop up my bacon and add it back to the pot. And I'm going to throw this whole chicken that I made when I made my chicken broth in the fridge. And I'm going to use that for meals throughout the week, just kind of really easy prep. I like to make rice a lot during the week. I'll make rice and I'll make a whole chicken, and then to make an easy meal like lunch or dinner, I can just chop up vegetables, throw in the rice and the leftover chicken, and you have a healthy meal that's super quick. Right after you add the chicken stock, this is going to be when you want to season the soup with Italian seasonings and also a bay leaf. You just want to rough chop this. That way you don't have gigantic pieces of kale in your soup. Alright, so the carrots and the potatoes are almost soft enough to add in the other ingredients. So I'm going to add some salt to my soup, and there are a couple things affecting how much salt you should add to this recipe, or really any recipe. In almost any of my soup recipes, I always say salt to taste, and that's because it depends on a couple factors. Now, if you use store-bought broth, it may already have had salt added to it. A lot of times those are very high in salt. Also, I make homemade bone broth, and so I didn't add much salt to it in the first place, and so there isn't much salt in here. So I'm going to need to add more. The other thing is how much salt you like. So I love salty soup, but I'm making this for a friend, and because of my kids, I tend not to add that much salt, and then I'll add more salt to my own bowl later. That way I don't add too much, and then everybody's like, "Blah, so much salt," because that's just how I like it. So I might be adding fairly more than you do just because of the homemade bone broth. Now while this is cooking a little bit longer, I'm going to drain and rinse my cannellini beans, or these are Great Northern beans, and I'm going to add them to the pot. And now it's time to add the kale, finally. Yeah, so I'm tossing the kale, and then it only needs to cook for a few more minutes, and then it's ready to go. This is the point I like to taste it, just to make sure that it has enough seasoning, salt. Now I like to watch the zucchini to make sure it doesn't get too soft. Otherwise it will pretty much disintegrate into the soup and you'll just be left with skins. And I know my daughter will not eat zucchini if it is mushy at all. So she likes hers pretty crunchy. So I love to serve this with some really delicious crusty bread. I like to butter it and dip my bread into the soup and eat it that way. It's my favorite. You could also top this with a little bit of shredded Parmesan cheese. That would be amazing. This is just so full of delicious, good, healthy ingredients. And of course, a little bit of bacon. Thanks so much for stopping by our Blossom Life YouTube channel. I like to share one new recipe, DIY project, or natural product every week. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. and let me know if you try this soup and how much you love it. If you want the whole printable recipe card, you can head over to the blog and get it there, and then that way you can keep it and save it, and I hope it becomes one of your family favorites also. Thanks so much for stopping by.